Hi there, as a part of AgilePoint's version 10 release, we're happy to announce support for MinIO. Now, if you're unfamiliar with MinIO, it is a very high-performance S3 compatible object storage system. In other words, it's a great place to store and retrieve large amounts of unstructured data. Things like files, images, backups and logs, as well as AI datasets. Now, one important distinction between MinIO and Amazon S3 is that it provides the option to be self-hosted. So you, the customer, have complete control over where your data lives. So before we can use this integration as a part of an app, we need to first create an access token. So to do that, we'll move into Manage Center. Now, as we're doing this, it's worth pointing out that we can create access tokens at multiple levels within AgilePoint. If you're creating a connection to MinIO for a specific application, feel free to use an app level token. But if you foresee this integration being reused across a number of apps, you would go ahead and create a global access token. Select Global Access Tokens, add a token, and search for MinIO. Now, I've already created one, so I won't be saving this token, but we'll start by giving it a name. And as you're seeing here, I have all of the details that are required for my token. So we'll start with the URL, the username and password, and we'll test the connection, which, as you can see here, is successful. Now, in my case, I'm going to go ahead and click cancel, but if you're creating a token for the first time, go ahead and click save, and we're good to go. Okay, so from here, let's take a look at our sample application. So we'll go through the app in just a moment, but for now, as you can see here, I've expanded the integration list for MinIO. So here you're seeing the various activities that we're including with this release, including create and delete a bucket, delete a file, delete a folder, generate a pre-signed file URL, get the bucket policy, get file information, and set a bucket policy. So over the course of this process, we're going to see each one of those activities demonstrated, and our process will start with a user submitting a form, and based on the data entered into that form, a bucket will be created. So let's take a look at the configuration for Create Bucket activity. So to create the bucket, I first selected the access token that we created a few moments back, and as for the bucket name here, I'm using a variable, details that will be entered onto the form. Now, optionally here, I can select versioning or object locking, but for now, that's going to conclude the configuration of this activity. So after the bucket is created, you'll see here I have a task assigned where I'll attach a file, and this is going to highlight AgilePoint's integration with MinIO at the forms layer. Okay, so to take a look at that, let's open up our eForm in edit mode. And as you're seeing here, I have my file upload control. Moving into configure, we'll see here the target file repository. Now, because this has been pre-configured, I'm just going to hit previous. So as you can see here, we have our document repository selected as MinIO. Okay, so after specifying our access token here, you'll notice that I can either hard code a folder path or I can use a dynamic folder path, which we got from the prior step. And if I scroll further here, I can specify the overwrite policy. Okay, so let's back out to our process model. So once the file has been uploaded, we're going to retrieve details about that file in the next activity. Okay, so as you're seeing here, we're using the get file information activity. So again, I've specified my access token. I can hard code the file path or use a variable that contains that file path information. Now here you're seeing the store response information. In response, I'm going to get things like the entity tag, file type, last modified date, size, and version ID. And I can map all of these back to my form schema. Okay, so in the next step, I'm going to see all of the details returned from the prior activity, including the file URL, which will feed into our next activity where a pre-signed file URL will be automatically generated. Okay, so I specified my access token as well as the file path. I can dictate the expiry date and where to store the response for the pre-signed file URL. And the details stored in this variable will be displayed in the next human step. Now, in addition to that, on the next human step, we'll also specify the bucket policy. So that bucket policy will be executed by this activity. So as you're seeing here, I have the set bucket policy activity. Again, I've connected to MinIO, provided the bucket name in the form of a variable. And here for the bucket policy, as you can see, this is a dropdown where I have 3 available policy types: public, private, or custom. In my case here, I've again provided a variable. And what comes back is going to be stored in my variable here. Okay, so our next activity is going to retrieve the policy of that bucket. So again, I've connected to MinIO, provided the bucket name, and provided a sample structure for that policy. Okay, so I've mapped what's coming back from MinIO back to my AgilePoint application. So on our next form, we'll have all of those bucket policy details displayed. And from here on out, we're going to start cleaning up the various items that we've created. So first, we're going to delete the file that we've uploaded. So here, I've connected to MinIO and provided the file path of the uploaded file. Now you'll notice here after the delete file activity that we have a timer. This is mostly for the pacing of the video so that we can all follow along. Now in the next human activity, we're going to get the folder path that we specified earlier and delete it. So again, connecting to MinIO and then providing the name of that dynamic folder path. Okay, and again, we have a timer for pacing of the video. And then lastly, we're going to delete the bucket itself. So you're seeing here, again, we've connected to MinIO, provided the bucket name. And as you're seeing here, there is a disclaimer indicating the bucket needs to be empty prior to deletion. So hence the removal of the file and the folder previously. So now that we understand the process model and each step, let's run the application. Okay, so we're going to provide a name of test bucket for our new bucket. A process has now kicked off behind the scenes, and let's track it in real time. And as you're seeing here, a bucket called test bucket has been created. Now that a new bucket has been created in MinIO, let's go back to the process monitor. And I'm just going to work from here just so that we can follow along with our process. Okay, so here we're going to upload a file. Okay, so we've just uploaded our file. Okay, so we've just uploaded our file. We'll go back into MinIO and refresh it, and we should see our file. There we go. Okay, now before we go back into AgilePoint, I just want to get the file URL. So I'll copy that. Go back into AgilePoint and go over to the next tab and paste that URL. Okay, from here we can submit. We'll see here that our process has moved along. So our activity has retrieved the file information, and we'll now see that in our next human task. So we're now seeing the 4 properties that we mapped earlier: entity tag, file type, last modified date, and the size. Moving over to our next tab, I'm going to provide the file path so we can generate our pre-signed file URL and specify this file expires in 1 day. So with that, our pre-signed URL has been generated, and we'll see that here on our next form. So we're now seeing that encrypted pre-signed file URL. And as a next step, I want to set the bucket policy. Now, before I do that, I want to go back to MinIO. And as you're seeing here, the bucket policy is now private. As we showed earlier, we do have other options, including making this public and a custom policy. But for now, let's go ahead and make this public. So our bucket policy has been set, and we've now retrieved the details of that policy, which we'll now see on our next task form. Okay, so we're now seeing all of those details here on our form, and if we go back into MinIO and refresh it, you'll see here our bucket policy is now public. Okay, so we've retrieved the bucket policy and shown it on our form. We are now going to start cleaning up. So the first activity was to delete the file. So if I go back into MinIO, refresh it, that file will disappear, as you're seeing here. Now to illustrate the next piece, which is to delete a folder, I'll go back into MinIO, drag and drop a folder. This is going to have one file within it. Okay, so I've just grabbed the folder URL. I'll go back into my application, open up the next task form, and provide that folder path. Okay, so let's go back into MinIO and validate the folder has been deleted. Okay, so as you're seeing here, that folder has been removed. And in just a second, we're going to see the final activity invoked, which will delete the bucket entirely. Okay, so back into MinIO one last time, refresh. And as you're seeing here, the bucket has been removed. Okay, so with that, that's going to conclude the content for this video. I hope this gives you a better understanding of AgilePoint's support for MinIO at both the process layer, leveraging the various activities we've just demonstrated, as well as a document repository. Thanks again. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you soon.